Greetings, everybody. In the name of Christ and on behalf of the 140 churches of the Michigan Conference, I am Lillian Daniel, Michigan Conference Minister. And as always, we begin our time together with a moment of prayer. Gracious God, we lift up to you the gift of being together, of learning from one another, of never knowing who the Holy Spirit will speak through next. We come to this gathering with long lists of things to do, burdens and cares for the world and for those we love and for our own tender souls. And we lay these now all on the everlasting arms of Jesus as we open ourselves to the Holy Spirit in this conversation. In Christ's holy name, amen.
Amen.
Friends, today I am so glad that our topic is one of great practical value. It is Make a Will Month. Who knew that there was such a month, but there is. And it is wonderful to be together. When we have these Zoom lunches, we range from all kinds of topics. Sometimes they are about spiritual preparation for the season of Advent. Other times we might get into what's happening in the world or learning about a given topic. And today I'm delighted to share with you one of our staff team, our financial director, and also development director, the Reverend Andrew Warner. Andrew and I have known each other for many decades. We knew each other as baby ministers, I think. We were getting started out, and I've watched Andrew's vocation take him to many places, including pastoring a downtown church in Milwaukee for a long time, and then going into work for the national setting in the philanthropy area, where he did incredible work, working with the Wisconsin Conference, and now working with us on the Michigan Conference staff. And what is financial director in development? Well, he helps our churches with a whole lot of things related to finance. And so when you have a question about something, be it property or legacy or budgets, Andrew is already helping a lot of our churches. And he also helps us with the funds we have with which to operate. And he can help you with your stewardship program. But today, he wants to talk with us about, I think, what he would call the low-hanging fruit that most churches miss in our stewardship and generosity efforts. It's the one thing that would perhaps garner us the most resources for future generations and our ministry. And it's the thing that, oddly enough, we are often hesitant to talk about or hesitant to ask. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Andrew Warner to help us with the tools to how to have those conversations and also to tell us about the difference it could make to our ministry.
Thank you, Lillian, and a pleasure to be with you all today. Just as a further word of kind of what I'm doing in the Michigan Conference, one of the things I've been working on for the last year is the creation of the Michigan Foundation United Church of Christ. This is a part of the conference, and the Michigan Foundation UCC works as a community foundation for the conference and all of our congregations. So the Michigan Foundation can invest the endowments of our congregations and help faithfully manage them. But the foundation also then acts as a resource for stewardship tools and conversations that to help our congregations as we're trying to raise, manage, and spend our money faithfully to do the work that God's called us to do. And so I want to talk to you and think with you about a particular tool that's coming to our Michigan congregations through the foundation, and that's a resource called Free Will, freewill.com. We'll provide the link as we go along. And this is really a tool to help us think about plan giving. But before moving into that, I just want to say a little word contextually about why plan giving, is important for congregations, why it matters, and what the kind of the opportunity is, as Lillian alluded to. So what we're doing across the United Church of Christ in various settings is doing an initiative called Together for Tomorrow. And I'm going to share the logo for it just because I happen to like it, and then talk a little bit about this campaign. So the campaign is called Together for Tomorrow, and it's really a chance for us to think about how we can work together in our congregations, in our communities, to bring donors together to think about and to care about the future of our congregations, and to do that through planned giving. And so, with the support of the pension boards, we're making a variety of resources available, in particular, this tool for writing a will. But the reason that we're needing to do this is because planned giving is one of those things that most of our congregations struggle to implement. And I think there's really kind of four places that congregations get hung up. So the first thing is that for our pastors, there's a lack of urgency. I was a local church pastor in a congregation. There was always something, breaking or broken or going wrong that I had to attend to. Someone was in the hospital, someone, that I needed to plan confirmation. If it was August, I was planning confirmation, like all of these things that were immediately pressing. And planned giving was that conversation that was easy to put off, because hopefully the person wasn't going to die tomorrow, so I could focus on what was immediately in front of me. And I just want to address the reality of that. I know for the life of our pastors that the immediacy of the demands on us or on our church leaders, the immediacy of what we need to attend to, can cause planned giving and those long-term conversations to get put to the side. But we're really missing that opportunity for transformational gifts. So, to use an example from my work in Wisconsin, there's a congregation in a small town that in 2020 received two gifts for a total of $1 million. Those planned gifts came as a result of a conversation that an interim minister had 25 years earlier. So there's this transformational gifts that can come from planned giving, but might be a 25-year lag time before you see those gifts. And so that's, makes it easy to put off. And yet we've done a disservice for our those who come after us if we haven't had these conversations. So our first
Andrew,
challenge is
may I
yeah,
do a jargon check?
yeah,
Just because I'm remembering a time when I was in the ministry where when people talked about planned giving, I didn't know what they meant. I
yeah,
thought, well, planned giving means I plan my pledge to my church or whatnot. And somebody had to tell me it's sort of a little bit of a euphemism for, hey, write the church into your will or the plans you make for after your time on this physical world, right?
yeah. Thank you for that reminder. When I use the word planned giving, I'm really using it for a whole category of gifts that you need to make a plan with a professional. So if I want to give a check to my local church, I can write my check. If I want to go on the website, I can make a gift on the credit card, my credit card. Those are things I can do myself. But a planned gift is anything where I need to talk to a lawyer or a financial planner to make that gift. So a planned gift can be one where I call up my stockbroker and say, I want to give appreciated stock. But it's most commonly thought of as that gift in a will. And that's the most common pattern for making a planned gift. But the person that you're planning with is a professional like an accountant or a tax advisor or a lawyer. And so those are that's with whom you're doing the planning is that third party professional. And so the other challenge I think that churches face is a lack of clarity. Lack of clarity about what the options are, and it can feel like there are so many different ways to make a planned gift that we can get lost in the details of it. And so I think where I want to focus us and encourage you to focus is on those gifts in a will. If we can have people remember the church in their will, that's the baseline way to have people make a gift. The other thing, the challenge that we face is a lack of comfort with talking about money. And so I'll talk a little bit in particular about how we might address that. But there can be discomfort among our church leaders about talking about a gift and a will because we might be uncomfortable about talking about things with money. And then lastly, we face a lack of communication about planned giving, about making a gift and a will. And this is where I think churches have long have in the past received lots of gifts and wills, but haven't more recently. And what changed is that basically universities and colleges got really good at communicating with people about remembering your university and your will, and churches didn't say anything. So in the past, we didn't say anything, and we were the only game in town, and so people remembered us. But now we're in an environment where every college and university that you've even walked by will invite you to make a gift in your will to that campus. Peter's, there in Lansing. I imagine the university of the university there in Lansing is a frequent communicator with pretty much everyone in your congregation. If we don't communicate, then our people are not going to hear the church as an option. So this idea of write a will month came about. Essentially, we church people are people of liturgy. We have seasons and festivals for everything. I like write a will month for kind of joining in the flow of things that we talk about. It was an idea that came about through fundraisers. Actually, a lot of the universities and colleges adopted Write a Will Month first, so we're catching up. But it was a movement that came among nonprofits to say, let's take a month and really focus education around encouraging people to write a will. And it helps us, I think, if we make an annual habit of this, that we avoid the urgency thing because we're doing it regularly. We avoid our problems with clarity because we have a simple message: write your will. We can deal with the discomfort because the conference is providing the language that you can use, and communication because we'll provide the tools that you can make this happen. So the idea of Write a Will Month is to have that regular time in the life of your local congregation where you're lifting up to people the importance of writing a will, of naming what's important to them, encouraging them to consider a charitable gift. So the Write a Will month is the month of August. Of course, you can do this in September if you can't get it done for August, but I hope that you'll make a push at this in the month of August. And then, one of the reasons why I also care about this is because I think this is one of the ways that we care for people in our communities, that it's not simply about getting a check for the church. It's not just saying, oh, someone's going to die, and we want to make sure that the church gets its share. It's not about that. It's really, we want people to name what's important to them and for them to make their own plan. I'm really acutely aware of this as a gay person. For a long time, my husband and I could not be legally married, and I knew that if I didn't have a will, the state of Wisconsin would decide what would happen to my estate. So I don't want the government to make those decisions for me. I want to make them for myself. And so I've long had a will, and I've seen, in difficult and painful ways, what happens when someone dies without a will. Just recently, I know a woman who passed. She and her partner had never gotten married. After 30 years of marriage, the surviving spouse was really dependent on the goodwill of the extended family to say that they wouldn't take the inheritance, but that everything could pass to the unmarried spouse. So that doesn't always happen, and it makes our loved ones in a vulnerable spot if we don't care for them. So,
and also, Andrew, isn't it the case that just you're slowing down the freeing up of the resources by not having a will? I mean, it goes to probate. A lot of those resources go somewhere else, not to anybody in your family even. So it's just like kind of throwing some of your own resources aside.
exactly, yeah, it's a slow process, and it complicates, in the midst of grief, it complicates what people have to deal with. So I think of a will as one of the ways that we care for the people we love when we're gone. Regardless of what we do with our assets, it makes their life simpler when we're gone. And it allows us to say who and what has been important to us. So I'd encourage you to think about Write a Will Month as an act of pastoral care. It's not just about raising money for the future of the church. It's about, this is one of the ways we care for the people in our community, is helping them make a plan. There's some research. Please don't ask me to cite it. I can't give you the citation, but I have read this often, that only about a third of Americans have an up-to-date will. And so I think that's probably true in our congregations, that maybe two-thirds of our members um, don't have wills, and even more of the, say, the couples coming to us to get married, or families coming to have a child baptized, or godparents coming to the baptism. There's lots of people who are crossing our life for whom we could encourage to make a plan to care for the people that they loved. They love.
Andrew, what do you say to people who say, I've heard this before, oh, wills are for rich people, but I'm just trying to pay my bills month to month. What do I have to worry about it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we're dead, presumably we don't have anything to worry about, but those around us do, and I guess what I've observed in pastoral ministry is that um, people will fight over things regardless of their value. And so it can be the estate, um, a significant portion of our population, basically their only asset is their car, you know, and $10,000, not a lot of money, but people can fight over any amount of money. And what we're saving our families from doing is those fights. Um, and I
And
think that,
items, right?
and
Sentimental items.
items.
I've
Yeah.
seen families stop speaking to each other over, items that are
Yes.
not of high monetary value, but it might be a piece of art or the china or
Or a
mostly
wedding ring.
families. Yeah. Or wedding ring, right? A piece of
Yeah.
jewelry.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just had a friend who was staying with me, and her mother had died, but before her mother died, she left a note dated and signed that her wedding ring was supposed to go to a particular grandson who just got married this year. And without that saved her and her three siblings a tussle over who might get that. And it was just simple. It was, oh, this was meant for this grandson to give to his fiance. So that's very helpful to leave that clarity. The other is that one of the things that happens is that sometimes people die accidentally or the cause of misfortune. And if you die in a car accident and someone else is at fault, the family might want to sue, but what happens with those proceeds depend on your will. So it's important to, again, we avoid family fights when we make those decisions in advance. People can be
And I
mad at
put in
us
a
instead of
plug
each other.
for in the same breath. I mean, how many pastors in this meeting here have um, had a grieving family come in, and how much better is it when they have made their funeral plans and they have said, the service at the church, and I would like these songs sung, and you know, I've picked out a scripture even. It's such a relief to the family, and it often breaks my heart when somebody who was at the church 3 days a week, always volunteering, always present. And then their plans aren't left, and they end up, the family has the service at the funeral home because it's not been made clear. It's just such a gift to give your family just to say, this is what I would like.
Exactly. So I want to turn to some of the things that people think about as they're creating a will. So as I mentioned, um, when we're creating an estate plan, we're really about balancing a couple of things. One is, how do we want to care for our loved ones? How do we want to provide for them? The next question is, are there charities that we want to think about and places that have touched our lives that we want to include? And then lastly, there's often tax consequences or tax choices that are made. And so, one of the things that happens when we write our will, when we make an estate plan, is that we're able to balance what we want to do for our loved ones, what we want to do for charities, and what kind of tax consequences we might want to think about or avoid. Um, uh, I've heard it said that, Generation X, which is my generation, is the one that most hates paying taxes. But I thought all Americans didn't like paying taxes. So, but I may be uniquely motivated to avoid paying taxes, but I think many of us, would prefer to give less money to Uncle Sam and more to the nieces and nephews and loved ones that we cherish. So, I think that's a consideration. So we want to think about how do we balance those. Now, sometimes, people will write a will and they may not want to leave a gift to charity. And I think that that is often true at different life cycles. I know for myself, when I was younger, my husband and I, our will, everything went to caring for our kids. And then as we've gotten older and as they've gotten older, we've been able to include charitable gifts into our plan because the kids are taken care of. The kids are launched. And so we're now including charities in our estate plan in a way that we didn't 25 years ago when we wrote our first will. I think when someone is including the church in their will, they're really making a decision to raise the church to the status of family in their estate plan. And it's true with whatever charity they might choose. They're saying this charity is like family to me. Um, I included with this photo. This is a photo of a local church in the 90s, gathered on the front steps. And why I asked the person I was visiting for a copy of this photo was because it was sitting on their mantle along with pictures of weddings and of nieces and nephews. This person didn't have children of their own, and this was a picture. This was a picture of one element of their family gathered on a Sunday morning and was dear to them. And so, of course, they were including these dear people and this dear place in their estate plan. Whenever we have a donor in our congregation who's including our church in their will, we ought to know and we ought to treat them with the respect of realizing that they have said that this church is part of their family. A woman a donor who's like that is a woman named Sally. Sally had come to her church because they had a grief support group. And so when her husband died, she was grieving. Through a friend of a friend, she got connected to the grief support group at a local church. She went there. She got cared for in the midst of her grief, but she also made a bunch of new friends, and that became a primary community for her as a widow. And she's now been in that church for 10 years. And of course, she wanted to include that church in her will. We all have lots of people for whom we have touched their lives. And if given the opportunity, they would want to include our church in their will. So I want to talk about some of the tools now that we're using to make this easy. And the first of those, let me find where I have it. That's not the screen I wanted to share. Uh, the first place I want to just make sure you're familiar with is this website, freewill.com/Michigan UCC. And if you go to that website, it takes you to this easy to use tool where you can create a will. It takes about 20 minutes. It can take longer, but it can take about 20 minutes to write out a will. So if we just start it here, it's going to ask for my name. And it's going to want me to verify. Okay, this is a little, I should have tested this part. I'm going to, I'm just going to tell you what it will do. If we look at the top, it's going to walk us through in about 20 minutes, getting the basics of our information about who we are, who our spouses are, if we have them, who our children are. It will then, we can either estimate our assets or we can list our assets. We decide who we want to be beneficiaries of our estate. It doesn't require a gift, but if you want to make a charitable gift, it makes it easy to include the local church. There's actually a listing of every UCC church in Michigan, so people can just drop down and it fills in the estate plan for them. It invites if there's any specific gifts that you want to make. including provision for any pets or other animals that you want to care for. Suggest giving some indications of your funeral plans, and then you review it. Now, freewill.com is a great option for most Americans in writing a legally valid will. The language will be specific to the statutes in Michigan, and will give you directions on how to sign it to make it legally valid in Michigan. Folks with a larger estate, I think really above, say $3 million in net assets, may want to use a lawyer. People who have an estate larger than $5 million or privately held business, I think certainly want to use a lawyer. You can still use free will to organize your thoughts. So you go into your lawyer with all the information kind of already organized so that you make good use of the lawyer's time. But for most Americans, this is a really easy way to get going on writing a will.
So, Andrew, I've actually tried it because I fulfill the criteria of not having $3 million. Um, and it really is simple to use. And if you get stuck on a part, it lets you save it and you can come back to it. So let's say you wanted to put your bank account number in there or something like that. You can do that later. It saves it as you go. And I loved having the drop down of the UCC churches. And it does ask you questions that I had never thought about, like my cats or things of that nature. And there's a paragraph in there where you can talk about your funeral. It really is simple. And then you simply have to get it notarized, which I was able to do just by going to my local UPS store. And I think it costs $15 to get that stamp. And I couldn't believe it was that simple.
Yeah, it is that kind of 20-minute thing. I think, what you might consider as a local church is to have a Sunday where you invite people to think ahead about a couple of questions, but to come on Sunday, they can fill it out in an education hour. One church I know had people do this on their own, print out their draft wills and come to church. And then in that particular setting, in that particular state, you needed 2 adult witnesses to sign it. And so they had people gather in the sanctuary and sign each other's wills. And they kind of made a moment of it. That won't work for everyone, but it was what I liked about that is it made it public. Like we're working on writing our wills in the church, and the witness doesn't have to read through your will to see how much money you have and where you're leaving it. They just have to see that you say that they've seen you sign it, or the notary doesn't have to read the will. They just need to say that Lillian Daniel did really sign this in front of me. So you might consider making it an event in church. You could do that last Sunday in August. Get people, bring in the wills that they've done in the month of August, and then let's have a notary at church. You may have someone in your congregation who's a notary who could do this. And if you don't, great to invite someone to church. We should always do that every Sunday, whether they're a notary or not. I want to use because I want to leave some time for conversation. I do want to share just a few resources that I think are important to help you do this work. And we'll put these, we'll send these as a follow-up email. So just real, sorry. So the first of these is we've created a template for how to promote Make a Will Month. And so there's a toolkit here that has an initial email, so you can send it out. You don't have to think about how to explain it. There's a follow-up email that you can send later in the month. There's a bulletin insert or a newsletter, email newsletter piece that you can put. And finally, a social media post. So there's 4 communication things you can do this month to get the word out about Write a Will Month. And we're trying to make it very simple for you to do. The language may need to be futzed or changed to fit your specific context, but you have something you can work with to edit. And I hope you'll make use of this.
It could just be part of a newsletter, right? Or put in the bulletin just to remind people.
Yep. So put it in the newsletter, do a pulpit announcement, send some dedicated emails out. All these things help get the word out about it. And then one of the things that I've also done is to create a couple of templates. So this is Canva is a website where you can easily edit documents. So this is a basic document that you can use for your congregation to promote plan giving in general. So this one, if we view the templates, this one just has an overview of what plan giving is and how to use it.
Great. So Jen will send all these out to everybody after our call today.
Yep.
That's great.
So the next one is one specific to plan giving. And so this is, covers why do you need a will? How does free will help? And then lastly, there's a marketing library from Free Will that will have examples of graphics. So a social media one, a header for an email, a buck slip, which is just a small graphic that you can put in a letter that you're sending, a postcard. So there's a lot of tools to try to make this easy for your congregation, and that we're hoping that you'll make use of.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I know I was kind of fast at the end, and that's because I want to really leave some space for what are the questions that you have in your context? What are the places where promoting a gift in a will or plan giving has been a challenge here in your context, or what are things that you're learning or wondering about when it comes to plan giving in your local church?
We had one question in the chat from Margarita where I believe I don't know if she wants to ask it herself in her own words.
Yeah, you have talked about the differences when you have a larger estate or a business. And I believe that if you have a will, you still have to go to probate. Is that correct? And that can be a lengthy process. Well,
So the process varies state to state. So I'm learning Michigan law, and I'm not a lawyer, but I know in Wisconsin, my dad had a will, and I was his trustee, and it was very simple, and I didn't need to go to probate in Wisconsin, and so I'm not sure what that process is, and we've had family members die in Florida and in Delaware. And in those states as well, we didn't have to go to probate. The will simplified everything.
okay. And when do you recommend to have a trust?
Well,
I mean,
I
setting
think,
up a trust can be expensive, and usually you need a lawyer.
yep. So actually, freewill.com has a path where you can set up both a will and a trust. And so you can use free will to set up that trust. I think that, certainly, what I did in my estate plan was to have both. And so the will just says everything goes into the trust, and the trust agreement then says what happens to the proceeds. I think more and more people are using that as a process to have the will essentially pour everything over into the trust. But I don't know that there's a threshold where you have to do a trust, but I would say, again, the larger your estate is, the more likely you're going to want to do a trust.
And one more question, because very reasonably, Pastor Lillian mentioned about thinking about your memorial, your life celebration, and it's great to have some write-up if you have special desires of scriptures, of hymns. Our pastor has like a 2-pagers where people can fill in. What are your suggestions to people for covering funeral expenses? Sometimes people have a little life insurance for that because it's paid. I believe it would be paid right away. I don't know if you have other comments.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's for some families in doing funeral planning, that it can be a comfort to know that the funeral expenses and costs of a reception will be covered. And so that's That's why that insurance exists out there. There are also funeral homes where you can prepay for the costs of your burial and whatnot, and they'll then hold that money, and so that whatever the cost is in the future, you've already paid for everything, and so that can be a comfort. I think that you know the particularly if you're not sure if there's going to be enough assets left to cover those expenses, that can be a real gift to your loved ones to know that everything is taken care of. I think that, if you're reasonably certain that there'll be enough in the estate to cover those expenses, then I probably wouldn't buy the insurance. I would essentially self-insure. Um, and and for those who are UCC pastors, you should know that there is a life insurance plan already for UCC clergy who are in the pension board's plan. That when you die, there's a $10,000 death benefit, and really for UCC clergy, that's a way to cover those funeral expenses. That's part of the reason why that's included in the pension plan for any church workers or pastors. So that's a nice benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Are there other questions or comments? I'm curious, have any of you been in a church situation where you were surprised by a bequest or a gift that came to the church from somebody's will?
Patty, I see you nodding. Can you share your story?
Yes, so there is a generational family here in the community, and only one member of that church actually comes to church here. She's since passed, but they all claimed this church. I've been here 9 years, and I have not seen a single one of them ever. But they've got property down on Crystal Lake, and when they've died, they left in their will $50,000, and we're just like, wow, and it's like, well, yeah, because they came to church here in 1962 and they were married over in the original church over there, and they were part of the design crew for here. And I'm like, great, where do I send the thank you note, and who do I go talk to express face-to-face appreciation?
Yeah.
And another person just recently died here. They lived out of state, so I never got to visit them in the process of their transition from here to whatever's next. But I did go to the funeral and met some of the family members, and they've already said, thank you so much for showing up. You never knew my brother, but thank you for being here. And we've already put our will together, and the church is receiving funds. So, thank you. And I'm like, thank you. And I don't know what that will be. I'm not going to ask at a funeral, well, so how much are you giving us? No, that's not enough. But it was just a blessing to be there and to hear their stories, and to say that they care about the church that much, and that it means that much to them for the work that we do. So I think part of all of that is the work that we do as a church in the community also makes a difference on whether people are going to give or not. And I've sat in on some of Andrew's classes already, and I drop it every now and then just in passing. Hey, I just did this class to my council. I just did this class, and we talked about planned giving. And, it's never too soon to start thinking about what it looks like, in your paperwork. Is your paperwork done?
Mm-hmm.
And what ministry would you like to carry on out of the church? What's important to you for ministry here?
Yeah, a lot of us are able to be more generous posthumously, perhaps, than we can in day-to-day life. And it's a good feeling to know that you can do that. And I've been surprised also by gifts. And a lot of times the gift came from somebody who didn't have a high-paying job or wasn't a particularly wealthy person, but was like that public school teacher who was a saver. And lived relatively modestly, and then surprised not only the church, but other organizations with these incredibly generous gifts as a legacy. It's amazing.
I've talked to a number of people who have been surprised as they've aged the amount of resources they have. And so for people who might have spent a lot of their working life feeling like they were just getting by, and then suddenly the home is paid off and they're getting Social Security, and suddenly they're just in a different economic place and are able to think about making a gift that they couldn't have imagined when they were 30. And so I think there's that reality. I think there's also, what Lillian, what you alluded to was the difference between the gift that I can make today and the gift that I can make when I'm gone. And so, I've got money in my checking account. That's what I pay my church pledge out of. But if I want to give, I can't give a portion of my house that I'm living in while I'm still living in it. But when I die, I can say I want 5% of my estate to go to the church. And it's just really awkward to give 5% away while I'm still living in the building. We haven't quite figured that out. So plan, those gifts in a will really allow us to make that gift that we maybe always wanted to give but couldn't, to a place that we love.
And similarly, I can't give my pets away to the church while I'm still living.
Yeah. And you may want to at times.
Yeah. Well, in the comments, I think Mary Beth said somebody donate a farm. That's a big deal in the Midwest. There's a lot of wealth in land, and so many people in farming, they live, month to month, but that land is extremely valuable, or the farming of the land. And I've seen churches when I was in Iowa, the big debate was, if you're given a gift of farmland, do you sell the land? Do you farm it yourself? Do you keep it? And this is where I would just put in a plug for churches to have a gift policy. Think through what kind of gifts we think, oh, every gift is good, but it's really not. There's the person who says, I want to give the church a van, and they give you their old van. And, then the church has to decide, are we going to pay for insurance to fix the van? Where's the van going to live? Liability, all the things. And when you have some kind of gift policy, you can protect yourself from something strange, like if somebody left you a pet in their will that you couldn't take. But, churches do get strange gifts sometimes, like an old school bus. I mean, that's a true story, and they're like, surely the church could use that to drive people to church. Well, no, they really couldn't. So, gift policy is a great thing to have and to be ready to receive that. And yes, Andrew can send samples of a gift policy.
Yeah, I'll be happy to send examples of gift policy. And just to underscore, Lillian, what you're saying about, but not every gift is acceptable. I was talking to a leader of a nonprofit, actually in Michigan, and in her community, it had flooding, and the number of calls that she got about people wondering about donating a house. She's like, well, had it flooded? That was an important due diligence. And these were basically unlivable houses that the person thought, oh, I'll give that to charity. And there's some due diligence, but those gifts can also be
a situation where there's debt attached. So just because somebody leaves you something doesn't mean you are stuck accepting it. If, like, say it was a piece of property that was underwater, gift policies help you, and then you're not hurting the feelings also of people in a tender time. Yeah. Are there other questions or things you would say? It is our time.
Can I say something?
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, PL and I were there. It was our first year, and this gift sparked. Roddy Dungerson was the Nebraska conference minister. The whole gift policy question, and actually connected us to the Nebraska conference. But after this, we did have a gift policy, and they ended up, the farm was in trust with a lot of farmers and ranchers in our church for 5 years, and eventually they didn't sell it. Eventually it became part of a greater not-for-profit regional anti-hunger foundation. But so it sparked that question.
Wow.
Yeah. Interesting. That's great. And sometimes, for churches, it's important to think about gift acceptance policy and your endowment policies before you get a major gift, so that what those policies can do is help clarify who's going to make the decisions and what the process is. Otherwise, a church that wasn't expecting to have a $500,000 or $2 million gift might suddenly have a big church fight about what to do with the money. And so I refer to it as like agreeing to what are the rules of the game before we deal out the cards. And we want to that's a way to help our churches avoid a conflict.
Wow, that's great advice. I have two more pieces of advice, but I am going to say our final blessing first because we have a no guilt. We do that at 12:45. May the peace of Christ, which passes all human understanding, fill your hearts and minds in the knowledge and love of God and the power of the Holy Spirit. Amen. And as is our custom, anybody's welcome to stay and chat a bit. But I was gonna say, what was the piece of advice? Oh, churches. So it's not just individuals who think about what's going to happen when they're gone, but churches, every congregation has generally written into their bylaws, what would happen if they closed? What would happen if something changed? And it was often the case that those assets would go to the Michigan Conference. Now we would say Michigan Foundation, but it's a really good thing to think about before it happens and to consider that. And I would also say that our ministry in the Michigan Conference is greatly funded by the gifts of churches that have closed. That is why we have the Emmanuel Scholarship Fund. We don't have much money in the Michigan Conference, but we have so much money for seminary scholarships because churches that closed and we put that money there. Similarly, the new church starts, but right now vitality grants that so many of our churches are getting, all those things, it all comes because there were churches that planned ahead that when they closed, those resources would go forward to other churches in their church family. And so, it's something to check and to think about. It is wonderful to see you all, and I'm so excited that we had our new pastor from Alpena on the call. I don't know if she's already gone, but it's always great to see everybody, and stay well. Write those wills, but don't use them anytime soon. Take care.